At 25 years old, I inherited $150,000. And within about 2 years, I spent it. But after 5 years, I sold a house for a god level of profit, and I was reset back to where I started 5 years earlier. In this video, we're going to look at how I would do things differently now for my particular scenario, and what my mistakes were, and what my smart money moves were. So before we break this down, remember that this is my personal story and it's not advice for what you should do in your scenario if you have $150,000. I am a licensed life and living benefits advisor in Ontario, Canada. And the way I look at money now, cash flow, investments, risk management, is very different than how I saw it when I was 25 years old. So we're going to look at the mistakes that I made and the smart money moves, and some hypothetical scenarios of what I would do with it now if I was 25 now and inherited $150,000. If I had a time machine. All right, so what happened when I inherited the $150,000? Well, I had finished college, or I was finishing college, so I got an education. So that was great. I was able to go into the workforce with my new career in digital media and computer graphics. Remember, this was the early 2000s. The first thing I did with much excitement and anticipation, confidence, was walk into a car dealership and bought myself a brand new car. Now, it was a Saturn, so it wasn't just a hunk of metal that I paid $25,000 for at the time, Canadian. It was a plastic car. So is that worse or does it make it better? I don't know. I went to a car dealership and bought my first brand new car. Cash. Lifestyle change. I decided to quit my perfectly good job. There was nothing wrong with it. I was working for a software company in downtown Toronto, loved my colleagues, loved my job, loved the clients that I worked with on a regular basis. And there was really no good reason for me to quit my job other than restlessness. And hey, I had all this money in the bank. Why not move? Why not just dump my old life, pre-inheritance, and move? So I did. I relocated to another country to be close to my family. I wasn't running from any debt. I had no debt, zero debt, no credit cards. To be honest, I was running from a relationship that I also ended, but I was chasing comfort. I was not thinking about any financial foundation at this time or investing for my future. So once I relocated, I got a new job. It was part-time, but it eventually turned into full-time. I enjoyed my work there. I had a few different little contracts, but then I landed like a good a good part-time job with benefits. And when I became full-time, maybe that's when the benefits kicked in, when I became full-time. But it was a good job with a law firm. It was a good job becoming a marketing manager and IT assist for a law firm, for a small boutique law firm. And again, part of the allure was that I was working in a very male-dominated industry. So, I was kind of raised with the ideal, or brought up with the ideal, surrounded by ideals that being a woman, you can do anything that a man can do. You can do anything you want to do that you can put your mind to. So that's what I was setting out to do. I was setting out to see what I can do, what my capabilities were, what kind of glass ceilings I could crash through. I enjoyed the challenge of working in an industry that was predominantly male. What else? How else can I put that? I don't know. So for the next few years, I continued to work for the law firm, but then I got recruited out of there for a very lucrative independent contract, and for a utility company. And I couldn't say no, and my boss at the law firm couldn't match my salary to keep me. They'd already done that once before, and they weren't going to do it this time because it was way much more than they were willing to pay. So I left the cushy group benefits and savings and all that stuff, the matched savings job for an independent contract that was pretty lucrative, and I was able to work from home. So I did that for a while, and I wasn't, as far as I can recall, I wasn't saving anything. So I bought a house, did have enough money to purchase a house and buy new furniture. At some point I did get a roommate. I had a spare room that I was able to rent for some period of time to help with the income. But luckily it was a cheap house. I purchased it. I purchased it not long after the dot-com bubble crash. So things were still low, prices were still low. It was a relatively new house, so it didn't have a lot of expenses. I didn't have to invest any money into the house. So I lived in this house for a few years. And while I was living in this house, the value of the market overall just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. So I got myself into another relationship, which pretty much was ending. And I was restless again. I did not want to stay in this town, in this city, in this country where I was living anymore. And I decided I could see the money that I could make when I sell the house at the peak of this market. And I did just that. I sold the house and made a stupid, massive profit. It was something like 170% or something. It was crazy how much I made. So I ended up selling the house successfully, resetting myself basically back to where I was about 5-6 years earlier when I first inherited the money. And what happens after that? If you want to stick around, subscribe, because I'm going to put that in another video, because then I go on new adventures and we'll see what mistakes and smart money moves I made the next time around. You can tell me what you think the biggest mistakes were that I made in the comments below, and what you would have done differently, or what you would do differently now if you had this kind of money just dropped into your bank account. Obviously, the car, a depreciating asset. You should never buy a brand new car with cash outright, especially if it's depleting your savings. So, it depreciates 30-40% as soon as you drive it off the car lot. I didn't really think about it then. And of course, now I know better. Maybe I would have thought of it differently, and I would have purchased a car that was about 3 years old, fresh off of a lease. So it was still fairly new, in good shape. Or I could have incorporated myself as a freelancer essentially. And my business could have bought my car and written it off as an asset for work, or a deduction for work. Definitely would never buy a brand new car outright, not even financing it. Now the relationship thing, running from the relationship thing, that's kind of something I've had always done in my past. Double-edged sword. It could be a good thing, obviously, for my emotional well-being, because for whatever reason, those relationships weren't right and they just weren't meant to last. So if I had them move in with me and in the house that I owned, and we combined our finances, things could have gotten a lot messier if we did still separate, or if we got married and then had to divorce. It just would have made things it could have made things a lot messier. So essentially, I've been single my whole life. I've managed, up until a certain point in my life, I managed to avoid that kind of catastrophe, dependency, and financial mingling where things just didn't work out. I've managed to avoid all of that up until a certain point in my life. But again, that's another video. And if you want to stick around for that, you'll have to subscribe. So what do you think about the mistakes that I made? Running to escape as opposed to building a foundation for myself, giving up group benefits and retirement benefits, retirement pensions, not paying for a income protection insurance plan or a critical illness insurance plan while I was still in my 20s, and it would have been dirt cheap, especially being an independent contractor working from home at a desk. The risk of injury is super low, so the rates would have been dirt cheap for me. But nowadays, if I were 25 and I had this kind of money and I was still working, it would be easy for me to pay that kind of monthly premium and still put the bulk of that inheritance into a savings. Now, back then, we didn't have TFSAs, tax-free saving accounts. We didn't have those back then. We have RRSPs and TFSAs. The RRSP is the retirement where the employer will put their matching amount contribution in for you. And they both, TFSA and RRSPs, have different rules and function very differently, but you can still invest in them the same way as you can invest in anything else. You can invest in stocks, bonds, equities, ETFs, mutual funds. You can do all of that stuff inside a TFSA or an RRSP. I would also open an FHSA, a first home savings account, and slowly save up the money I would need to put a down payment on a house. I don't just spend all of my liquid cash, and I still have time to grow. And I certainly would lock away, maybe 50K into some sort of long-term growing annuity where it would just accumulate, it would invest and compound and accumulate over years. And then once I reach an actual retirement age, then it would pay me out a monthly fixed income. And that can subsidize whatever else I've earned up, beyond that. So there's a lot of different things I could have done that I didn't do. And looking back on it now, knowing in the financial education I have now, there's just so many better, smarter moves I could have made. And I'm not saying that I've made terrible mistakes, terrible decisions. They were uneducated decisions. So anyway, at 25, I inherited 150K, spent it all, earned it back 5 years later, and I've learned, looking back, 2020 hindsight, what my mistakes were and what my smart money moves were and what I would do differently now. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done differently if you inherited 150K today?